sensitive person are people who grew up and you kind of feel different from other people. You've never really fit in. You're probably quite empathic. And the way you think and feel the world is different than maybe the majority of the people that you know. I know that that was my case. It's how I grew up. And for me, it's been really, really hard to find my place and to understand how I'm wired and that I am wired differently. And there is nothing wrong with me. And that awakening or light bulb came just a few years ago. And I just turned 60, so it was a long life without knowing. And just a few years ago, I read a book, The Highly Sensitive Person, by Aron. And I started reading it, and from the first pages, I just started weeping, because it was like, oh my God, I wasn't crazy. This is actually a thing. I'll say also that some people that look into low-level autism can find a lot of overlap between, and some people are scared of the word autism, but right now there's just this discussion of people that are neurodivergent. We have a nervous system and a way of perceiving and processing information that is different than the rest of the world. My book is a memoir, and I'll talk about it later, but there's a little passage in the book when I talk about what I've discovered and what are highly sensitive people and what is our experience growing up. And I'm just going to read that to see what touches your heart. What I want to do is talk about the big, beautiful tribe I mentioned earlier, my tribe, a group of kindred souls who share a similar experience of the world and journey of self-discovery. Those of us who grew up feeling like we were different and didn't fit in, who were bullied because our depth made others uncomfortable, who were not understood and couldn't understand the workings of this world, or why people were unkind, or why the world wasn't ruled by love. Those of us who were left feeling like something was wrong with us, like we were in need of fixing, like our difference made us somehow defective and inept. Those of us who stood in the margins, isolated ourselves so we could be ourselves, who escaped in creative endeavors, who were called too sensitive, too intense, too caring, too particular, too complicated. Those of us for whom stifling our true nature caused our bodies to respond with exhaustion, inexplicable sickness, and chronic illness, and for whom living out of alignment caused our minds to become a bit of a torture chamber, favorable to anxiety and depression. Those of us who have spent our lives trying in vain to explain, justify, and defend our character when we didn't understand it ourselves. Those of us who were told to tone down or change who we were if we wanted to make it in the world, if we wanted to be accepted, be invited, and be loved. Those of us who learned not to trust our feelings and yet know in our heart of hearts that we are meant for something more, that we have something important to do, a higher purpose to live, but haven't quite been able to put our finger on what it is. It's been established that we are 20 to 30% of the population, which is huge. It means that there's a whole big chunk of the population that has been not recognized, feeling like this world is not made for us. And in fact, there are enough of us that we must have a purpose. And that's why today the title of the talk is The Necessary Rise, because there is a reason why we were designed this way. We were created that way. And Too much of our life has been about suppressing these aspects of ourselves in order to fit in order to be loved, in order to be invited, in order to be accepted. But hey, I just want to take a minute here. I need your help. There is something weird going on right now with small channels, small creators, and the algorithm. A lot of people are saying, what's happening with my views? And I can attest that it's happening for my channel too. So if you could subscribe, share the video, share the channel, invite people over, like, comment, watch another video, that would be super helpful and I would really appreciate it. If my videos are improving your life with entertainment or a little bit of light or making you do deep shifts because something I say resonates with you and you would like to support me in a more concrete way, I would invite you to go to buy me a coffee. You can buy me a virtual coffee. And I'll just state some facts here. I don't want to mess up anything with the AI listening to me, but if you use the super thanks, I receive 25 to 30% of the value of what you send my way. And if you use the buy me a coffee link, I receive 95%. So I'm just saying, I would really appreciate it because it's your gifts that allow me to continue to do what I do. Thanks. You know, we learn to adapt. Our empathy, our differences, maybe we were in a supportive environment. So for everybody, it was not something that was painful. But for many of us, when we start asking ourselves, because of all this feedback that we get, that how we express ourselves, how we can be effusive because we feel love so deeply, because we think a lot, we actually physiologically have a different way of thinking, and it makes us, if you've been told that you think too much, we're actually thorough thinkers. We do not think too much. We are creatively and deeply thinking. So it appears to others that can't follow along with us that we think too much, because indeed it seems like we're always analyzing, thinking, feeling, processing. And when we get stimulated by our environment or by conversations, after that we need a lot of downtime in order to be able to process and just kind of take it in before we can move forward. I came up with a really cool metaphor to describe us. It's that 80% of the population are four-wheelers. They can go out, they can get in the mud, they can swirl around and go up and down and in rough terrain, and then they come back, clean it up a little bit, and they're ready to go again. And a lot of us are frustrated because when we're invited to do these things, it's like we can't follow, we can't keep up because it's just too much. And the thing is, we are like Formula Ones. We are more finely tuned engine vehicles. We need fuel that is purer in order to function. And when we are out in the world, we can do incredible feats. We are splendid. But once we do something out there, not on all the roads, we have tracks that are made for us. And when we come back, we need a lot of time in the garage. And every time we go out, we need to come home. We need to quiet down. We need to retune. And the engine needs to rest before it can go out again. And this is one of the things that when you're highly sensitive, because in the description of highly sensitive is the depth of our perception, depth of processing, sensory overload. We are very sensitive to sounds, noise, conversations, and all these things. And also that we need a lot of downtime. So we actually do need that, and we need our sanctuary. I, in my experience, did that in my life without knowing that it was a response to all that overstimulation, that the world was just too much for me. And the thing is that when we're highly sensitive, we inherit our sensitivity. It is part of our physiological body. It is not a choice. We are wired this way, and we are wired differently. And there's nothing wrong with us. But as we inherit our sensitivity, we also inherit the belief that we have to hide it. And when we hide it, there are consequences to that. Once we internalize that something is wrong with us, that's where the problem begins. Because we look at everybody else and think, how do they do it? How do they do life? How do they go out in the world? And it just seems to be okay. And for us, it's like every day. It's like, okay, another day. I can do this. I can be myself. I can go out. I can perform. I can do this. But it is this constant conscious effort. When we grow up as highly sensitive people and we start suppressing how we feel, our emotions, and we start limiting how we allow ourselves to express ourselves, well, we become people pleasers, we become all kinds of different things. But it can also be that it affects our body. Because suppressing our true nature puts a lot of stress on the body. And stress in our body, the medical world tells us, it suppresses our immune system. And then we are more vulnerable to disease, to predispositions, and just our bodies start to break down. That's why there's a large amount of people who are highly sensitive who have chronic illness. And that's my experience. And I'm going to share that story.